8 years ago, I made a video about how and where to find wood for free. It involved hunting for materials in urban alleyways, by communal bins, and a little bit of skip diving. Then around 5 years ago, I moved out to the countryside, and there isn't much treasure to be found around these parts. And I kind of miss that thrill of the hunt for materials. So I'm going to go back to the area where I used to live. We'll see what we can find and then make something out of it. So I'm off to the North City area of Norwich, an area with rows and rows of Victorian terraced houses and alleyways, and before I'd even got out of the car, I could already see a box of junk, and there were a couple of hardwood picture frames here. Nothing too exciting, but I figured I'd take them, mainly because I didn't know how fruitful the day would turn out to be. And I need to make some things out of the materials later in this video. Wow, what a lovely day for a junk hunt. I thought I'd start the day at my old house, so I'll be walking past that shortly. And the alleyways around here were always pretty good. In fact, I can see some timber already. Looks like an old piece of 3x2. Looks pretty rotten on the end, so I think I'm going to leave that one. Someone's used an interior door as a garden gate here. Pile of old carpet down here. An old bathroom cabinet here, and an old tank of some sort. This is some chipboard, so I'm going to leave that alone. This here is the alleyway where 8 years ago I found a beautiful Sapele veneered chest of drawers which I restored in a video, and as you can see I'm still using today. It's one of my favourite bits of furniture. Not much here of interest today though, just a couple of bits of rotten woodworm infested wood. Hello, what's this? Please be solid wood. Looks like poplar. And there's an area here where the paint's scratched off. That looks like rubber wood. It's pretty heavy as well, so I think this is some sort of hardwood. At this rate, I'm going to fill the car up before I even really get started. This used to be another one of my favourite alleyways, but not a great deal here today, other than a mattress, some plastic containers, oh, and a broken ceramic pot, which I don't really want, but it is green. Do I take the broken pot? Well, it's green, so I'm going to take it. I went up to an area called Mousehold next, with its impressive views over Norwich, where I found an old gate, plenty of timber on this, but not really something I want to take today. One of my main concerns before deciding to do this was that things might have changed since I moved away. Maybe people weren't throwing away so much junk, or maybe the council were doing a better job at keeping the alleyways clean, but so far that doesn't seem to be the case. This skip was in someone's garden. I would never take anything from a skip without asking permission from the owner first, but there was nothing in here that interested me anyway. Not much to be found in this area, so I headed down to an area called Heathgate, which seems to have a bad reputation, but as is usually the case for places that are made out to be quite rough, I've never seen any trouble here, and it's full of ordinary people just living their lives. Oh, I can see more treasure. It's a bit twisted and warped, and it's started to delaminate as well. There's this local shop in Heathgate which had a pile of metal shelving outside and what I thought was one piece of plywood, so I popped in to have a chat to the shopkeeper. Yeah, by the side of the shop there's some plywood and some racking. Is that junk?
Yeah.
Is that to be taken away? Is it alright if I take the piece of wood?
You need the wood.
Yeah.
We'll ask and let you know about this.
Okay, thank you. He said I was welcome to take it, and there were not one but two decent sized bits of 12mm hardwood ply here. I left the metal shelving, hopefully someone else gets to it before it gets thrown away. There's a communal bin area over here, which used to be one of my favourite spots for picking things up. But today, just bins. But what can I see in the distance over there? So there's an offcut of plasterboard here, and some scraps of wood, but most of that is just MDF. There's another communal bin area down here. I don't really want either of those. I made my way back over to some other alleyways around the North City terraced houses. Norwich is such a beautiful city. I hope that comes across in this video, but it's also a right dump if you look in the right places. In this particular alleyway, it was pretty disgusting to see so much litter and neglect. This was by far the worst one I'd seen all day. I did find a couple of good lengths of treated 2x2 here though. This is actually straighter than anything you'd find in B&Q. Elsewhere I found some building materials, but it looks like someone is having some work done here, so I'll leave that well alone. And shortly after that I found another part of a bed frame here, but it wasn't really clear if this was sitting in someone's garden or not, so I'll leave this. I haven't met a single cat yet, which is usually one of the perks of doing this. So keep your fingers crossed for me. Wow, look at that absolute beauty. I would love one of these someday. And finally, I met a cat. Right, I think this is going to be the last one for today. This turned out to be another house having some construction work done, and this alleyway is a dead end, so I turned around and headed back to the car. So then, a pressure treated 2x2, two big 12mm sheets of hardwood ply, part of a bed frame, a broken ceramic pot, and two hardwood picture frames. Not a bad haul for a couple of hours walking around in the sun. I'm going to take this headboard apart and see what this is made of, and oh dear, I can tell by the way this was flopping around that this wasn't hardwood. This is MDF. Let's hope for better luck with the rest of this. And oh dear, that top rail is MDF too. This doesn't bode well. These slats are solid wood though, and fortunately this bottom rail is too, so it's not a complete bust, and I still have that long bed rail to look at. And surely this is solid wood. It's the part that takes all the weight of people sleeping on the bed and doing other recreational activities, so it's got to be solid wood, hasn't it? I started cutting away with my knife to find out what was beneath the paint, and it wasn't good news. How could I have been so naive picking this up? So let's open it and see what's inside. No way! Solid pine, plywood, plywood. I don't think I've ever seen such bad materials used for something that's meant to hold the weight of a person. Scraps of plywood nailed together with painted cardboard glued on the front and back. Shocking. Anyway, let's see what the slats are. This to me looks like radiata pine, so at least I can make use of these. At this point I dread to see what's inside these posts. Unbelievable. This again is a cardboard core with some weedy bits of pine laminated to the faces and a skimpy block of wood at the top and bottom. The bottom rail of the headboard was another piece of radiata pine, so that's something at least. And I feel like a bit of a mug for having picked this up. But still, this radiata pine is nice looking stuff and the paint came off easily, so I'm going to use the slats and the rail to make a project. Now, since I have limited solid wood to use on this project due to that terribly constructed bed frame, I'm going to turn to the hardwood picture frames, which I can use to make some edging pieces that I can use on the plywood. I want to get rid of all these grooves, so I run the pieces through the thicknesser until they are flat. I'm not sure what type of wood this is, but I think it could be maple. The other frame I picked up was oak, but it was a little too narrow to use for what I had in mind. So now I have some edging pieces which I can use on this plywood, and I'll only need one of these sheets of ply to make what I have in mind, which by the way is a step stool, as we could do with one of those around the house. These two pieces are going to be my steps, and the measurement here is what I'll use for the depth of the stool. And I'm going to mark up the shape I want to cut to what will be the outer pieces of ply first. There'll also be some inner pieces of ply, which will need cutting to a slightly different shape, so I'm transferring the marks onto these so that I can cut them out. I can then laminate the inner and outer pieces together. Now I can cut the edging pieces to the width of the laminated ply and get them glued and nailed in place. I then just need to shape the trim pieces. Originally when I designed this stool, I designed it with a taper to give it some shape, but the problem with that is that it would then be too big for the place I have in mind to store it, which I'll show later in the video. So instead of adding shape via the tapers, I'm going to make a couple of cutouts, one for a handle, which will be useful for moving it around, and one to form some legs. I can then use the first panel as a template to mark up the cutouts on the second panel. I want the plywood to contrast with the lighter pine treads, so I'm using a dark oak wood dye, and then I can start assembling the stool. To reinforce the treads and add strength, I'll use some through dowel joinery, and just to make sure that I'm only using salvaged material on this build, I also made my own dowels from more of that radiata pine using this dowel jig that I got recently. I'll leave a link to this in the description box. It looked like the stool needed a rail at the back to add strength and prevent any racking, so I decided to use another slat for that. And I secured that in place with screws, but I'm going to plug the holes with more pieces of dowel to hide the heads. For finish, I'm using Odie's oil, which was sent to me a couple of years ago now, and my first impressions are it's a nice finish, but the thing is, I'd never buy it. It's over £60 for a tiny jar, and I used nearly half of it just on this one small project. If it were a tenner, I'd probably buy it, but you can get much better value elsewhere. Anyway, having said that, thanks to Odie's for sending it over, and sorry. The step stool is strong and sturdy, and it's going to be really useful around the home. And it stashes nicely underneath our bed, which is a bonus. Please let me know if you enjoyed this junk hunt video, because I'd love to make more of them. I had great fun filming it. I can only really do that if the video performs well, so please do consider sharing it on social media or with someone who you think might enjoy it. And just in case you're wondering why I picked up that broken ceramic pot, I did actually have a project in mind for that, but it didn't pan out in the end. But it might be something that I revisit in future, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching.